So I see on your Twitter, man, we got to talk about this because over here at the Sakura podcast, we also like to talk about stuff affecting us, man. You're heavy into the Black Lives Matter movement, and we've interviewed a couple people who are also, pro Black Lives Matter and everything. What what started you getting into it? I know with me, my personal experience is like I'm not black, but I have been put in situations with the police that I've got called the hard R word, the hard NER word, and
Hmm.
I've been in that situation that I didn't know how to deal with it, or even today, if I would have dealt with it a certain way, it probably would have ended worse. So that's why I'm with it and everything. But how about you? What are your experiences with it?
So I came into it in sort of a roundabout way. Just so I grew up in a really conservative area, around very like conservative family and stuff like that, and they're still very conservative and everything like that. But I sort of once I sort of moved out on my own and was starting to listen to choosing who I listen to a little bit more, I found out that like, or I started to realize that like a lot of my experiences, um, with like, because I had been pulled over for like speeding or something like that, and it's usually in my experience, it's never a big deal. It's just sort of like, hey, you were going this and yeah, just give me your ID and stuff like that, and then you're on your way. Sometimes I get a warning, sometimes I get a ticket, and it sucks. Like that sucks. But like that's the worst it's ever been for me. And like I would like hear these stories about people who were like pulled over because a tail light was out, and that ended up in them getting shot. Like it just like it escalates so fast, and it's like that's it sort of like opened my eyes to like maybe my lived experience isn't like it's not the end all. Like I there's so much experiences out there from people that don't look like me or don't sound like me or anything like that, who just by virtue of that alone like gets treated in such a different way. Um and and whether or not it's even a conscious effort on the part of the aggressor or something like that, like you don't have to be like, oh, I hate black people actively and stuff like there's always going to be like some sort of internal bias in the back of the brain that like affects how you handle people. And I just wish that like more people would realize that and realize that when people say Black Lives Matter, they're not saying like they matter more than other people. It's just that like the message of all lives matter is like it's not even really a message. It's just sort of a response like, well, yeah, of course everybody matters, but like at the same time it's just sort of a cop out kind of thing, I think. And people don't realize that it's what we're trying to say is like, yes, every life should matter, but right now these lives are being treated as if they don't, kind of thing. I'm not the most articulate about this kind of stuff. I'm trying to figure out the best way to word it, but
The best.
that's sort of the way that I've come to understand it. It's just that like people in the United States get treated differently because of how they look or sound or anything like that, and it's
Mhm.
very apparent. Like if you just look at anything, um, in the media and stuff like that. And I feel like there's just so many people that like just want to bury their head in the sand and be like, you just got to be nice and follow everything they tell you and stuff like that. And it's like there's so many videos of people of like non-black people treating officers with like disrespect and shouting at them, and like they walk off scot-free, whereas like I've seen a video where a guy was paralyzed in his car and he was trying to tell them that the entire time, and the guy the officer just drags him out of the car, and he ends up on the floor, and like he's raising his hands, he's showing his hands like to the best of his physical ability, he was following orders, and it's still escalated to the point where this man is just like injured and he's on the ground. Some like it's crazy like how obtuse some people are when they look at that and they're like, well, maybe he should have done this. And it's like, no, that's that's not okay. Yeah, like I just yeah.
I feel you, and I think the best way to kind of articulate it is when people say what kind of to what you were saying is it's not that all lives like other lives don't matter when people say Black Lives Matter. It's because the why focus on other people when there's one that's currently like wounded. You know what I mean? Like you have a bunch of
Exactly.
people in an infirmary, and there's one who needs to go to the emergency room. You know, because that one's got stab wounds. The other people are just like, you know, common sickness, like a cold or something. You know, like that's the best way I would put it. Is like
Yeah.
why we're trying to focus on the person that's bleeding out. You know, person that could
Yeah.
die. That doesn't mean the other people that are sick don't matter. It's just that there's one that really needs attention at the moment. You know.
I'm over here with my sniffles. I can't believe you treated that man who's bleeding out before me. How could you? This is equality. This is America. Equality.
Yeah, yeah. And also, one of the ones that the All Lives Matter one kind of upsets me because it does undermine the whole thing of Black Lives Matter. But the one that gets to me a little bit more is the Blue Lives Matter one I've been seeing around. I'm just like, it's such a stupid, because being a cop is a job. You're not born a cop. And I guess some people just don't understand that. So I've seen it trending a couple times
Yeah.
on Twitter, and I was just like, oh my god, the stupidity of some people.
Because like you can, and I do have friends that are cops and stuff like that, and I don't try and say like all caps. I don't try and say that all cops are bad people or anything like that, because I know that there are people that there are people that try to go in and they're trying to do the best they can to do what they can within the system that they're given. It's just that like the culture of cops as a whole has just regressed into this sort of tribalism where it's like cops protect cops regardless of like any wrongdoing or anything like that. So that like and there are stories of cops trying to report on bad behavior, and the person that enacted that bad behavior gets either a slap on the wrist or they get reassigned to another district or something. And in worst cases, the people reporting the bad behavior end up getting fired or also reassigned to a place where they basically get a demotion or a pay cut in some way. Like it's not overt. They're like, haha, don't mess with us. We're gonna cut your pay or something like that. It's just sort of like these subtle changes and stuff that just it sort of like discourages reporting on bad behavior. And that's I feel like what people are trying to call out right now. It's like it's not that there aren't people that want cops to do better within the system. It's just that like the system itself and the culture surrounding it discourages it. It actively discourages reporting bad behavior. It actively discourages stepping in when you see bad behavior enacted. So like it's just really bad all around. And I do know that there are instances of cops just like going into a store in their uniform or walking around the street in their uniform, and they get like assaulted because they see their uniform. And it's like that sucks as well. But at the same time, if you were walking around in your street clothes or something like that, you probably wouldn't have had that interaction. Like nobody would know that you were a cop as long as you weren't in your uniform. And not to say that like that's a cop out, but at the same time, Black people don't have that. Like they are what they look how they look no matter where they go. They can't just take it off like a uniform. It's just that follows them everywhere. And yeah, I don't know how best to put it aside from that, but that's kind of how I've come to explain that, I guess. Yeah,
and I can agree with you on that. No, definitely.
It's also a culture thing too, or like I don't know, bad training too. I know my brother's friend, he's a cop, and I think one time we sat for dinner, he was like, dude, the way they train us is crazy. So we'll come out of school and they'll have us with a veteran and they'll drive us around a bad neighborhood. And every day they'll be like, see that neighborhood right there? Whew, you don't want to be there. That's a bad neighborhood. Next day, same thing. See that neighborhood right there? You don't want to be there. That's a bad neighborhood. And then all of a sudden, boom, 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 you're assigned to that neighborhood. So the cop goes into it like, fuck. All I know is that this neighborhood and these people in this area is bad. So yeah, it's
based on nothing, like based on no experience of being in that neighborhood or anything like that. Like just it's you're pre-biased to assume the worst of the people in that neighborhood because of what your cohorts and colleagues have told you, and that just perpetuates like it just perpetuates it. It's sort of it yeah, that's probably just the best way to put it. It just perpetuates it. It's yeah.
These. This actually reminds me. I actually took law enforcement in like a law enforcement class in high school. Like my, I want to say junior or senior year. I can't remember exactly, but the way they actually taught us. Well, they showed us videos of people. Apparently, that's part of the cop training. They show you video of the worst that could happen if you're not always like on your guard. And I guess in a sense, they're trying to train you to always fear for the worst, or to always be in fear of your own life when dealing with anything. And I think that actually could be one of the causes, because they showed us a video of like of them opening a jail cell to move a prisoner, right? And that prisoner somehow managed to get a hold of like a spoon or something, and like he sharpened it, and he stabbed some dude right in the eye. That came to open the door. Like the moment the door opened, he just got stabbed. And I guess that's what one of the training is. They show you the worst stuff that could happen. Like, you know, pulling up to give someone a driving ticket because they were speeding or something, and then they just shoot you and they run off. You know, like, and they show that, and that's why I feel like cops are kind of conditioned to be like, oh, you know, I could die here at any moment. Yeah, assume the worst. Also, back to the whole training thing, which is something I was going to add a second ago, was that I believe that the time to become a cop is a lot shorter than the time to become a lawyer, which I believe like training for a cop is anywhere between like 1 to 3 months. I could be wrong. And then the time to become like a lawyer is like, it takes like years. Like it could take like 3 to 4 years, you know? And it's like
they're paid to enforce laws that they're not fully educated on.
Yeah.
And they're like, we'll just, we think we're right, so we'll just arrest them and have the court figure it out later. And that's, yeah. Yeah.
So that's something that I read on Twitter, and I'm like, you know, this makes sense, because I didn't know how long it took for a cop to become a cop. But I guess this kind of makes sense. You have less training to enforce the law and become a cop, like get a profession out of it. Than when you become someone who like that fights for either the wrong or the right side of the law when you become a lawyer. And that takes even longer to become someone who enforces it with like actual like guns and like going around patrolling and stuff. And that actually like made me think about it. Like that's kind of messed up. Like why does it take longer to become someone who's physically out there that has the authority? Like regardless of what you think, regardless of if a cop decides to abuse their power, the fact is that when they're wearing that uniform, they have the ability to abuse that power. They always have that underlying like power, and like that badge that always shows like, hey, you know, can't really do anything wrong because I have the power here. Whether they choose to abuse that power or not, good cop or bad cop, the fact is that it's there, you know. And and the fact that it takes a lot less time to become a cop than it does a lawyer is kind of a little backwards to me. So it does really have to do with the training. Now thinking about it.
It's just the whole system needs to be revamped, I feel, entirely. And like and also it's cops are I said that weird. Cops are like the go-to for so many things that they shouldn't be the go-to for. Like they're not counselors. They're not like if there's a domestic dispute that's non-violent, like a non-violent domestic dispute, some people will call the cops to like intervene and like blah, blah. And it's like that's not what they're there. Like that's not what they should be there for. Arresting a homeless person, putting them in jail isn't going to fix the fact that isn't going to help. That it's not going to help that homeless person. It's not going to help anybody just putting them in a jail cell. Like it's there's so many just things that cops are used for that they shouldn't be. It's ridiculous. And that's part of like what people are talking about when they talk about like the whole defunding the police. People think that like defund the police means like don't give any money to the police. They should just be abolished entirely. And there are some people that do believe that like police should be abolished, full stop. I'm not entirely sure if I agree with that like entirely. I think it just should be. I just think it should be reassessed and repurposed and restructured entirely. So like take the money that like they don't need military grade weaponry. Like no police force needs that. You can repurpose that money into like social outreach or community stuff. Like spend more on community outreach and public housing or something like that for the homeless that are just being put in jail cells every now and then because, like, oh, you're not allowed to sleep under this bridge. This bridge doesn't allow for this. Come with me, sir. Sort of thing. It's I'm not the smartest person in terms of like where I think I'm not the most informed on where the best place to put that money is, but I do know that like if you find resources, and it's worked in other towns where they take some of that money and they repurpose it in community efforts and community outreach and stuff like that, and it ends up working out better because a lot of police enforcement is just sort of like putting a Band-Aid on like a terrible wound. You're treating symptoms, but you're not treating the cause. Like a lot of the cause of crime is like being in a bad social situation. Like you don't have money or you don't have friends or anything like that. It tends to psychologically turn you towards sort of that kind of criminal activity and stuff like that. And a lot of the times, if people had sort of more of an access to education or an access to community resources or job training or the ability to get jobs and stuff, investing in those types of things would reduce the amount of people that feel that they need to turn to that sort of thing, I feel. But yeah, I'm harping on a lot of stuff that like I'm not the best at explaining and stuff like that. There's definitely a lot of people that are a lot better at explaining this stuff to me. A friend of mine, Zeno Robinson, he's done a great job of spreading information and getting as much information as he can out about this kind of stuff. So I would definitely recommend listening to him about this kind of stuff and looking into more informed resources. I'm just some straight white guy who, like I said, my lived experience has been not even like it's not even been the worst. Like I've had struggles, but none of my struggles has ever had to been. None of my struggles have ever been rooted in the way I look or the way I sound or anything like that. It's never harmed me in any way. So I've always pushed for listening to people who do have those lived experiences more so than just me. Like I'm just some guy who happens to want to push voices that are saying how they feel and what their experiences are and all that kind of stuff. But yeah.